Hi, so in this portion, we're going to look at structuring lessons for environmental education, right? So how do we turn a lot of these ideas and start to build actual experiences? Now, as we set this up, one of the things I want you to keep in mind, or maybe even a thing to sort of dispel at the beginning is there's not going to be a formulaic approach. There's some lesson planning models maybe we're used to that are very behaviorist in the first this, then that, then that, then that. And that's how you essentially train a kid to know a particular thing or do a particular skill. Those can have a time and place, but environmental education isn't that, right? Because we're really trying to build an in-depth understanding of something that's extremely complicated, right? And beyond just the understanding, we're trying to build a connection and meaning and value, right? And so those are not going to be formulaic things, right? You can't give a formulaic script and at the end, you will care about this topic, right? That's just not how experiences work. So we're going to talk about practices and ideas, but not necessarily like some very linear, absolute step by step. So a few kind of key principles here. The first is that we have to be intentional and honest about the aims of our lesson, right? If our aim, our goal is we want students to care about a topic, if we want them to take a particular action, maybe some of those aims and intentions are that we want them to have fun and we want them to be curious. We have to be honest about that. We can't hide behind we want them to know the 4 Earth systems or be able to write a 5-paragraph essay about an environmental challenge, right? We have to be very honest about what is it that we are trying to do and not hide behind maybe just particular knowledge. Remember, knowledge does not equate to action. So if we're setting this up just for them to know something, that does not mean action, and that we cannot equate and use the two interchangeably. And then ultimately, students' perceptions of the experiences are key, not necessarily your perceptions of the same experience, or even how the experience might fit within the broad scope of all experiences that exist. So this photo I chose intentionally here, for example. This is from a group of high school students I took to Rocky Mountain National Park several years ago. And this is coming down a mountain that objectively is not that big compared to most in the valley. The hike is not that far compared to a lot. The technicality is really not that much compared to a lot, right? So on a lot of like more objective measures, it's a pretty moderate, mild mountain. But students' perceptions are the key. So if it feels big to them, it's big. If it feels scary to them, it's scary. If it feels exciting or interesting, right? Their perception of the experience is key. So we are setting this up for them to perceive it as interesting, important, engaging, whatever that might be. But we're setting it up for them to be very intentional about trying to make sure they see it that way, not necessarily just hiding behind objective, right? Objectively, it's interesting, or objectively, it's important. So a few tools to help us come from the CRISPA themes. And so this is Bruce Ermacher, Bruce Ermacher, Christy McConnell, and Brad Conrad. And they're themes of an aesthetic experience. And so the themes are connections, risk-taking, imagination, sensory experience, perceptivity, and active engagement. And Bruce, Christy, and Brad have a lot of resources around these if you search CRISPA themes. But they're each things that are very nice elements to aim for. So if we're trying to set up this experience to be meaningful and engaging within a lesson, maybe we're going to try to set up an opportunity where we want to encourage the use of imagination. Or I want to make this more of a sensory experience, right? So I'm going to use perhaps audio recordings, or we're going outside and we're going to listen for birds, as I'm sure you can hear in the background around me. Or I'm going to really try to encourage them to see connections between this idea and things in their daily experience. Or I want to encourage some sort of risk taking, right? Something that perhaps I anticipate is outside of their comfort zone, and I really want to challenge them in that way. Right. So the guiding principle here is that we are not trying to just pass along knowledge, but we are trying to create a setting where students are build an understanding, right? So we are trying to set a bunch of pieces in place. We're trying to give them the right sandbox to play in, whatever metaphor you want to use. We're trying to set that all up for them to have a setting in which they feel like they've built an understanding. So, like I said, we're not going to have some formulaic approach that doesn't really exist, and that doesn't make sense for what we're trying to do. But there are some guiding questions we can use in helping us structure the experience. So the first one is just, what are the concepts and topics I really want students to understand, right? Are we exploring erosion or runoff or the impacts of drought? Or what is it that we really want students to understand, right? That's not test questions, but that's like the big picture of what is it that I care about. What experiences do they bring to the topic? Now, something I want to point out with that is those are both experiences which are useful and maybe experiences which are miseducative, right? So experiences that maybe they think they know things about the topics that aren't very accurate, or they have some misconceptions that others have helped them develop. And we need to plan for either addressing those or creating a setting where they realize and discover and correct some of their own misconceptions, right? But what is it that they have experienced with the topic before? It might be media. You know, what have they seen on TV? What have they read? Right? What experiences do they need to have had with this topic? Right? In some cases, that might be like, what do they need to have seen? We're asking them to really explore and think about the topic. If it's something like erosion, right? If we're looking at the impacts of erosion or runoff within our community, we probably need to see what that looks like, right? We probably need to see an idea of and create a like actual visual of like, oh, that's what erosion looks like here. Like, we've discussed it. Maybe we've even done an activity in class, but what does that look like here? Like, they need to have seen that within their community. Again, and referring back to the prior misconceptions, or prior experiences, what misconceptions are they likely to bring or create? The challenge with a lot of topics isn't that kids don't know anything, it's that they think they know things. You know, topics with weather. There's a lot of like misconceptions they'll bring in, especially in the kind of current social landscape. They're going to have misconceptions about the nature of science, right? That they might think something like climate change is a guess, right? That, you know, oh, it's just a guess or an idea, not something with a lot of scientific evidence. And then finally, what skills might they need to develop? Are they critical thinking skills? Are they data analysis skills, right? Maybe we're really going to look at energy usage in our school. And so they're going to need some skills around data analysis because they're going to be collecting some measurements about energy usage. And so we've got math skills we need to develop, right? And so it's an environmental lesson, but there are some like content area skills. Maybe it's skills related to writing, right? Maybe they are writing a letter to city council to ask for something. and maybe they're writing to ask for a pollinator garden to be put into on school grounds, and so they're writing a letter to the school board, right? So those skills of writing a formal letter might be something that we need to develop. Some of those could be observational skills, right? They may not really be able to observe, and so we need to develop those skills of just how do you observe something. So again, guiding questions, depending on your topic, maybe they're not all relevant, but I think they can really help you kind of hone in on what's going to need to be a part of this, right? And you can sort of imagine as you answer each of these, how you might start to structure them into multiple pieces, right? If we need data analysis skills, maybe that's a lesson or day that, or even a few that I'm teaching pretty intentionally and explicitly some of these data analysis skills, right? Because we're going to need them. Maybe we have days that are very focused on the experience of, right? Maybe the experience you want them to have is just collecting and using data, right? So we're going around and measuring electricity usage in our school, maybe measuring temperatures with our HVAC system, things like that. And so you go, okay, well, we probably want to structure data analysis skills before data collection. So when they're actually collecting data, they know what the end purpose is. Maybe there's some background on, they don't really understand how electricity is produced, or especially produced here. So, that's going to be some more intentional lessons. And it's going to start to be several pieces and components that are all going to fit together, but they can help us start to see what are the experiences and steps going to need to be. Now, so there's not a formulaic approach. If you are in the case of, okay, but I need some sort of outline to work with. For science people, this is very familiar. For other content areas, it might be a little bit less familiar. It's the 5E lesson plan model, and it really is just an inquiry focus. So the 5Es are engage, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate. A couple clarification, so the engage component is, of course, just getting students interested in a topic, idea, right? Showing them that this is something worth doing. And explore, we're giving them the freedom to really experiment with. I mean, obviously, literally explore. And then a key point here where I think there is some misconception, even from folks who use this more often, is that in the explain portion, that's not necessarily the teacher explaining to the students what they just saw, but the students creating explanations based off of their exploration, their experimentation, their evidence gathering, their information gathering, whatever that might be. And then the elaborate is that we're taking those explanations, that knowledge, and applying it elsewhere, right? And so this might be that in explore, we're really gathering a lot about energy usage within our school. And in explain, we're putting all of that together to say, okay, our school uses this much energy in these ways. These things are the biggest energy uses. And then potentially in elaborate, maybe we're taking that information and we're putting it into a presentation for our school administrator or school board, or maybe trying to give suggestions or things we're requesting from the school board. Maybe we think the school could be more energy efficient in some way. And then, of course, evaluate is where, as an educator, we're looking at what is a demonstration of knowledge, understanding, and determining as the educator, right, do we feel like students have developed the understanding that we would hope that they would,